So we first have our consent agenda. There are prior minutes from the October 4th meeting, as well as a number of policy reads. And then, Lynn, this was interesting. I don't know if this is the first time, but I'm not sure I've seen policies to be removed on a consent agenda before. So that, I was just curious.
Yeah, I think that's just more informational. It doesn't, we've kind of aged out of that one.
Okay, that was my question, is why are they being removed? Is the family and medical leave and class rank valedictorian salutatorian policies?
So we had already made the shift in procedure for class rank to shift to the Latin honors.
Yeah,
And that was agreed upon. That policy remained in effect until 22,
Okay.
but we didn't pay attention to needing to delete it after we
okay.
got to that place. And then what was the other one? Was it FMLA?
Family and medical leave, which I
So
assume is
we
part of
don't-
the master agreement.
Well, it's not. It's
Right?
actually part of the law. So we don't need it in policy because FMLA
Okay.
is statute. So we
Okay.
just follow the statute around FMLA.
Sure.
And as laws evolve, it doesn't make sense to have policies around laws because we could inadvertently end up having a policy that hasn't been updated that would contradict
Right.
changes to the law. So when it comes to FMLA, we're just going to follow the law.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. Thanks for that clarification.
Sure.
Any other questions from the board, discussion about the consent agenda? So I'll make a motion to approve. We'll do that by roll. Lisa?
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Any need, Lynn, to reprioritize the flow of the meeting?
No.
Okay. So we're in our public comment recognition of visitors. It looks as though we have someone in the virtual space. Michelle, are you here to participate in public comment or here just as an observer? Morgan, are you able to communicate with?
No comment. She
Just
sent
an
it by
observer?
chat.
Okay, okay, great. And Jared, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Evening. Children are called dependents for a reason. They depend on their parents for guidance and protection from those that do them harm. Children are also called dependents because they have neither the emotional nor intellectual maturity to deal with many things. Yet on a daily basis, children of all ages are subjected to gender ideology in schools. There are signs, posters, and flags promoting phrases like LGBTQ safe zone, sexualities and what they mean, join Gender Sexuality Alliance, all genders are welcome. Educators also expose this ideology to children by wearing pride ribbons or by sending children links to websites that promote topics such as transgenderism. Now we are told that doing all this is being inclusive. The reality is that schools are required to get parental consent to give their children Tylenol or to watch a PG-13 movie. But when it comes to discussing the sexuality of children, because that's what this is, parental consent is not needed. We have to accept it. Children's innocence is attacked repeatedly on issues of race and sexuality, and this is justified, so long as it's done in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's hypocritical to encourage parents to be involved in their children's education, but then keep parents in the dark and not allow them any say when it comes to these topics. In the past year in Vermont, this ideology has led to a 14-year-old girl getting suspended because she spoke up for herself and her friends because they felt uncomfortable in dressing in front of a teenage boy in the girls' locker room. Her father, who defended her, was also suspended from his job as a coach for calling a boy a boy. Now the courts eventually determined that the school district had wrongfully disciplined the girl and her father. We've seen another coach have a brief conversation about the biological and physical differences between boys and girls, get fired the next day. We've even seen an entire Vermont school get canceled for standing up for the safety of their girls. Educators in our district have acknowledged the confusion that gender ideology causes children, especially young children. And some have said that they're scared to say anything. Many feel intimidated into silence. And after these examples, it's understandable. So I question the phrase, all are welcome here. It seems that you're only welcomed if you stay quiet or agree with the ideology. Children, the community, and the use of our tax dollars would be better served if you stop spending time promoting all things gender ideology, the latest social justice cause, and other ill-conceived DEI initiatives, and put that time and money and resources into academics, thereby also protecting children's innocence. Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to our school spotlight with Terry. Thank you.
Yes, so what we put together for you all to see is a video highlighting, this is our growth year, is what we have dubbed this, but we wanted to celebrate the joy that we have so far this year. So we threw together this clips of photos and some videos and statements of things going on. So you'll see things like staff celebrating each other, students celebrating each other, a couple of moments from our two most recent school-wide celebrations. We just had a dance party yesterday because they earned their second school-wide celebration, so there's clips from that. Some students and staff wanted to share some of their thoughts about what makes Sheldon so awesome. I also, at the end of the meeting, if you want to take a quick tour into the modular unit, I can lead you on that, because I know some of you are very curious to see how it shaped out. So we have that as also part of our spotlight at the end of the meeting, since it would be hard to walk our video viewers as well through that. So you are welcome to hit play.
I chose Sheldon because one, I'm part of the community. And I think there's a lot of great qualities in our community. I think we have great people and great resources. And I really love the people in this school. I think it was a very strong place for me to go and get support to work at. And I think we're moving in the right direction. We have a lot of great things going on here at Sheldon.
So I chose Sheldon because long distance moving from Iowa, all the information I could find was positive, and even my realtor's father worked here and said it was an amazing place.
I chose Sheldon School because at my interview, everyone was positive and welcoming, and I could tell that they shared my teaching philosophy and my philosophy on education, and I think this is a great place for students and staffers.
Mr. Ethan, why did you choose Sheldon School to be a teacher at?
I chose Sheldon School to be a teacher because it's a great place to teach. The kids are great, the staff is great, and I love being here. It makes my heart happy.
My school is really awesome because the teachers are really nice. There's a whole bunch of kids. I like Sheldon School because there's a lot of people and a lot of them are really nice and they have a lot of sports to do. I like to be at Sheldon School because teachers are nice. I like to be at Sheldon School because teachers are awesome. Why the Sheldon School is amazing is because they have amazing food. When it's winter, you get to go sledding, and it's really fun. And you get to be kind when it's Sheldon School. The Sheldon School has a lot of people come, and you learn a lot. Teachers are so kind and generous, especially Miss Marie and Mrs. Hitchcock, and Mrs. Principal. And the school hopefully stays alive forever. I love this school. Very disappointed we many of the students who work together to make this new year. Because we couldn't be here in person together, Hitchcock would. Please accept this gift on behalf of the many artists who helped make it.
We are proud of this artwork. It's a patchwork quilt to represent our community and our grand mascot. Please think of us all when you see it on display in the new district office.
That's awesome. Oh, that's lovely.
Wow.
So lovely.
So this is the Sheldon gift that the team students.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. We will definitely think of the Sheldon Bears when we walk down our hallways.
Love it.
Oh, yeah.
Thank
marvelous.
you. So lovely. Oh, we will gladly take that back. Thank you so much.
Oh, really wonderful.
Our
Thanks
art
for
teachers
it, too.
have done a little collaborative, and each school is working to build us something
Oh,
like this so that we'll
nice.
be able to see our students as we go down the hallway
Love
and their
it.
work. So thank you.
And
That
what,
was such a lovely video.
that was awesome. And what wasn't on there is why I chose Sheldon. And y'all heard it when you interviewed me last January, February. And but I have to say, when I watch that video and see all those pictures and all those kids, that's why I'm here. So it's been, I mean, yesterday's dance party brought me so much joy with the K2 part of it. Kids, even the ones that I haven't exactly learned their names yet, were like coming up and giving me hugs in the middle of the dance party and jumping for joy. And it was that reminder of we do this for the joy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's lovely.
Awesome.
for sharing that.
Thank you so much. That's
Sorry, I actually
fantastic.
ran.
All right, so, moving on to the financial update with Morgan.
Yeah, and tonight we're focused only on the first stages of budget building. So for folks who are out in Zoom land, I'm just handing out hard copies of what you received by email earlier today. Earlier today being about 5 minutes before we left the office to come here. And I can get hard copies for you in the future if you want. And as I mentioned in the email, we will be going primarily over staffing tonight and the changes from last budget year to this budget year. I've brought over the expenses from last year's budget to this year's budget. I have not really looked at them at all yet. So there are things like high school tuition, which we know will have a pretty significant increase given what we think we're gonna have for student numbers, and some of those other lines that are impacted more heavily than just by the regular year-to-year increases due to inflation. So I'm gonna start by sharing with you the slideshow that you've seen versions of many times over. We're at our second board meeting looking at the budget. Again, we are hoping to have this finalized by January. We will have the yield numbers on December 1st. That is by statute, and I have a little more confidence in the accuracy of those numbers than I had in the last 6 weeks or so. So when we get to your third board meeting in December 6th, we'll have one of those big numbers that impacts your tax rate. We won't have the new long-term weighted ADM numbers yet, but we will have, I think, a pretty solid estimate because we now are being given the tools to make those estimations. And the way it's calculated going forward, it doesn't tend to move as much as the yield, as the equalized pupils number did. And then the CLA figures drop the week between Christmas and New Year's. So hopefully on target for a January 3rd budget warning. If not, we would have to schedule an extra meeting sometime in probably the second week of January. That. Again, 3 seats are up. Berkshire, Lisa, I believe. Montgomery is Kat, and Sheldon is Emily. Your 3 board goals, which we've covered in the past. The enrollment trends, which we've covered in the past. And the reason I leave these in here is that this will be the seed for the slideshow that we do for the public at your annual meeting. Additional considerations, the only change here is that the VHI has filed their health insurance rates for next year, and that has come in at a 16.4% increase. That has to go through the Department of Financial Regulation to be approved. They, in the past, have not really changed that, and my understanding, which is limited, is that their lens is primarily to look at the stability of that health plan. So I don't see them necessarily advocating for a lower rate. It would more be that they're going in and saying the health plan doesn't have enough reserves, and so the rate would go up. But I think we will be pretty confident using that 16.4, which is high again, but it seems to have been consistently high over the past few years. And then again, a reminder that we're in negotiations with your support staff union, so the raises that we show in here at this point are just projections. It's unlikely that we will have any stronger idea by the time you need to warn your budget. Usually those first meetings with the union happen in January. So for staffing changes, this is largely unchanged from last month, but I'll go through it again. This budget proposes bringing the music teacher in Bakersfield up to full-time and then moving 2 days a week of a family engagement coordinator from the ESSER grant into the local budget. More movement in Berkshire, the addition of a half-time health teacher, the removal of a 1.0 interventionist position, which we don't currently have filled. Addition of one paraeducator who would primarily serve as a classroom substitute. Family engagement coordinator 3 days a week. Currently 2 days of that would be from ESSER for a position that's shared between Bakersfield, Berkshire, and Montgomery. That shared position would then become just between Bakersfield and Berkshire. And then the addition of a 1.0 assistant principal, as we discussed last month. In Montgomery, addition of a half-time health teacher and planning on combining that with the P.E.G teacher if possible. An additional one paraeducator and change. The one may change before you warn this budget and be moved into the SU budget as a behavior technician. Still trying to figure out where that position is going to land. And then 1 day a week family engagement coordinator. So that's the share that they have of this person currently paid out of ESSER. And then rounding up their part-time custodian to full-time.
Morgan, can you clarify that family engagement situation? Because you're saying that we've got 0.4 in Bakersfield and 0.6, and that's the same person for a 1.0?
So currently on the ground, you have 0.4 in Bakersfield, 0.4 in Berkshire, and 0.2 in Montgomery. What this is proposing is instead of splitting that position 3 ways, we would split that one 2 ways, so 2 days in Bakersfield and 3 in Berkshire. And then Montgomery would share one with Sheldon. And so it would be 0.2 in Sheldon and then 0.8 or 1 day a week and 4 days a week in Sheldon. So it would be an additional position. It'd be one additional family engagement coordinator and then bringing the one that's in ESSER over to the general fund budget.
Can you go back to the prior slide? So why are we feeling like Bakersfield needs, that's 2 days a week for Bakersfield, but only 1 day a week for Montgomery when they're comparable sized schools?
So the administrators were in on this discussion, and Sandy is very comfortable with, because she also has a full-time school counselor who takes on
Okay.
some of this work, so
Okay.
she's very comfortable and really doesn't want more than 1 day.
Okay.
The Sheldon piece, that the reason that we have talked about splitting it this way also is because Sheldon hasn't had someone in that role. That they previously had 2 school counselors, one left last year, and she had previously done some of the family engagement work. So when she left, there wasn't anyone to put in that role. So it is something that, especially given the size of Sheldon and some of the needs, it's needed here.
Sure.
So it would be adding 0.8, and we felt like that would make sense for Montgomery to partner
Yeah,
with Sheldon, so we would have 2 full-time.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So also in Sheldon, the addition of a 1.0 health teacher, a STEM unified arts teacher, that family engagement coordinator, and then someone who would be shared as a paraeducator role and office assistant. So previously we had 2 administrative assistants here in Sheldon. One person had left 3 years ago maybe, and that was never filled. And then district-wide, removing the shared health teacher, which we were not able to fill, and so that's part of the reason you see those additions at the school level. And then adding an SRO position, which you had discussed at the last meeting.
Can you talk a little bit about the STEM Unified Arts teacher?
I can, and I think, do you have that in your slideshow?
I do. Are you talking about the ratios?
Yes.
Yes.
And so I'm just curious, like, what does that encompass? What opportunities does that give Sheldon students interested in STEM that now may not be available to students in the other schools in the district?
So one of the things that I've been trying to look at is there's a difference in size, obviously, between all of our schools, and we're trying to look at the amount of time our students, or the number of students that need to have elective classes, and the number of people that you need to have providing electives in order to be able to get the number of staff that you have to provide prep time to. It's really complex this year in Sheldon because we lost someone who was in tech integrationist role and was pushing in to do some of that work in classrooms, and we don't have that position anymore. So when we looked at this, we talked about the numbers. I don't know if we want to share this now, or do we want to share this under my section?
Yeah.
I asked Morgan to look at this just because we've got varying numbers of students, varying numbers of teachers, varying numbers of classrooms in each building from K through 8. So in order for Sheldon to make it work, they need another elective teacher in order to make, for them to be able to offer enough choices for kids so that we can cover all the prep time that we need for teachers as well. So the STEM is something I think that you engaged kids a little bit.
STEM, or can I say
Yeah,
that?
sure. Yeah.
So Spanish and STEM were the two requests. And I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring this up. What would be really nice is if we could, if this could approve to hire another UA, that we post for both and then hire one depending on what we received as applicants, because both were high interest and high need for our community here. Students have been expressing a lot of interest, specifically in Spanish foreign language. That is, they wrote, I didn't even know that was going to be something they were interested in until we surveyed them. And then a lot of them have been expressing interest in robotics. They heard about one of the schools who has robotics in their LEAPS program, and so they've been really interested in coding and robotics and finding opportunities for engineering outside of what we can do in a typical science classroom with the engineering unit in middle school and that kind of stuff. And it's not just the middle school that wanted. So I got it all the way down to like 3rd and 4th graders who really are interested in like trying to do like the Lego challenges and that kind of stuff. So they were really interested in the engineering science kind of and how that looks in their lives.
So we've been trying to look at this through the lens of equity for both opportunity and for the levels, the staffing levels since we started. And I can see on its face, this is like, okay, but that's another opportunity that Sheldon students will be able to get that other students won't. So one of the reasons I asked Morgan to pull this data together was to demonstrate there's some real differences on the right side. Is that actual, Morgan? Current?
This is current.
Okay. So on the right-hand side, you see how you have like 0.5, 0.2, 0.5. That's the FTE of all of the electives that are on the left that we currently have. So you can see the numbers that you have for each of your schools, and then the total number of elective teachers per each of the schools. That 295 population number in Sheldon is
We have 354.
It's doesn't include pre-K,
got it. Okay. So
and that's last year.
and it's
Last year.
year's
I was just
number.
saying.
Yeah.
We don't have that much.
So when Morgan calculated this out, you can see that you've got 4 total elective teachers in Sheldon currently, and then 1.7 in Montgomery, 2.7 in Berkshire, 2.8 in Bakersfield. And then we said, let's look at it through the lens of per how many students, right? So how many elective teachers do you have per 100 students? So you can see that Sheldon has got 1.36 per 100 students. Montgomery's got 1.35. Berkshire's got 1.64, and then Bakersfield has more than the others. They've got the fewer students than the others, but there's some historical decisions that were made in Bakersfield where when Bakersfield was a single district, that board decided that PE was something that they wanted students to have every day. So they have a full-time PE teacher. So in Bakersfield, they have that on top of all the other electives, and that isn't something that we have in the other schools. We have one elective a day in the other schools. So in order for Terry Sue to get what she needs to get in terms of the number of preps and offerings for the students, because remember we split out some of those middle school groups, so we actually had more groups that we had to offer electives to. She needs one more elective teacher.
I have 20 classrooms to supply.
So when we look at what's in your budget, the yellow would be the proposed shift. So you're being asked to make a decision about, in Berkshire, you've got health across the board that we're trying to offer in 3 other schools. Music, an increase to 0.2 in Bakersfield, and then a full-time STEM in Sheldon. So you can see when you go, that's for next year's proposed. And then if you go to this per 100 students, it makes the others, like Terry Sue gets to the right level in Sheldon, but it's still Bakersfield's much higher.
And Aaron's got a hand up.
Oh, Erin, yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I understand the need based on numbers, why there's a need to add an extra UA teacher, but I think that we are, by doing this and allowing there to I'm not using the right words right now. I want you to know that I'm in support of the position I'm leading at, but I feel like we're also creating what we're trying to avoid by allowing some students to have access to teacher and this kind of program there's not. So I would like to challenge or push back on maybe not hiring somebody for each of those schools, but allow the programming to be happening within the schools so that all students have access to STEM.
I don't know if I fully grasped what she was saying with the kicking in and out.
Yeah,
There's a
Erin, it
middle
was
part.
the connection was a little choppy, so I'm not sure we fully kind of heard everything you were saying. Erin, do you hear me right now?
Yes, I'm trying to type it up.
Okay,
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay. I'm trying to get at this idea that we have this inequity that kids who go to larger schools can bring in more teachers who are able to provide more choices for kids. And even though I see the staffing levels, and I agree with you, there's a need for it, I want to challenge you to provide the same level of this enrichment to all of the children in our district, not just the children who are in large schools who need an extra body. I want to see STEM in every school.
I totally hear where you're coming from on that, Erin, and if I had the ability to say that we've got the money and we can find the people to do this in every school, this is a challenge that small schools have when you're trying to think about opportunities and access, is that it's the economy of scale. If we were talking about these not as 4 separate entities, but as one, figuring out the equation part of this would be simpler. We could figure out like the opportunities and then like how to make that, how to be able to distribute that. But when you're talking about these 4 separate schools and the size ratio and the other piece, if I put another elective into Bakersfield, Rhoda and I are going to talk about instructional time because they already have 2 electives a day. And I mean, we definitely can find ways to weave in STEM in other ways, Erin. And I don't know if this would satisfy what your concern is, but through LEAPs and through science curriculum as well. Got Lisa.
I would move the mic closer to whoever was just speaking. I can't even tell who that was, and I can't see who that was because the camera's not moving either.
Where's
That was Lynn who was just talking. So you didn't catch that, Kat, what her response to Erin was?
Everything Lynn has been saying has been really in and out for me, and I think it would be helpful is there a cameraman? Could he like move to the speaker when
I
they're
don't think the
speaking as
speaker's
well?
coming
And does
from
that
that.
change the audio and pick it up more?
Are you able to hear me pretty well?
Yeah, I can hear you wonderfully.
Okay, so Lynn's gonna move over to my table where it seems to be picking up the sound a little bit better.
Because I really wanted to hear that response, because I'm totally understanding what Erin is saying, and I would just love to hear the response.
So I think
Sorry.
it's okay. I think maybe I can say it better the second time now that I've practiced once. I think that this is a complex puzzle to solve for because we've got 4 different schools with different variables in terms of the number of staff they have and the number of like open elective spots they have. So if I'm trying to solve for Sheldon, in terms of that, it has to be different than Bakersfield. If I were to add another elective into Bakersfield, right now I'd be very concerned. I'm already concerned with some of the instructional time because they've got 2 electives every day that you'd have to deduct those minutes from your core content, whereas the others all have 1 elective every day. So if we were talking about this as a system and we weren't talking about 4 separate and distinct schools, it would be easy to solve for looking at this through the lens of opportunity. It's much more complicated when you've got these multiple small schools, and I totally hear what you're saying, Erin, with the economy of scale. It does make it a little easier to figure it out in a larger school. I don't know, even if the money was there, I don't know that we could find enough people. Like, we don't even know if it could be STEM or if it would need to be Spanish or something else. But I do understand the concern.
I just think that like when we first merged, that was one of our top priorities, is getting just a second language for our children, because the students in, our side-by-side district has that opportunity. And so when they leave from us and go over, they're already struggling with having a disadvantage. And I'm just challenging you guys to think about the possibility of shifting something so that all of our students have access to this. Because it is, then if you look at children in any of those other schools who are not having access to this, then having the opportunity to leave eventually and go to Sheldon, and you're creating a hole in your own system. Like, I know it's not a simple fix, but I don't want the thought process to stop, because it's important that all of our children have access to STEM in the curriculum and or language in the curriculum. I shouldn't have to say I'm going to this school because the school offers this, and children in the same district aren't getting the same opportunities. I want us to be really thinking outside the box to make sure all of our children have access to the same opportunities. And so if Bakersfield is getting 2 a day, I think there's a way that you can think about how you change those that incorporate the STEM.
So would you propose taking certain things away from other schools in order to create space for that? Or reducing?
I just want to make sure all of our students are getting the same opportunity when it comes to major fields like STEM and language. And I don't disagree with you. It's a huge task. I totally understand that, and I support that. And I don't want you to feel like I don't support extra people. I want us very mindful of the fact that we've been working hard to make sure all of our students had access to a second language when we first merged. And you just start bringing up STEM, which is huge when we talk about careers and college ready and all of that stuff. And if we're only offering it in the curriculum in one school, then we have to be starting to think about how do we do that for all kids, so all kids have those opportunities.
I don't disagree with you, Erin. I think this is the beginning of a larger conversation. Actually, how can we solve for that if we're trying to provide that with a limited resource? And I'm not just talking money, it's human resource too. So how do we solve for that in 4 separate schools?
You go, Lisa. Okay.
Lisa,
Thank you. I can't say it any better than Erin has already articulated what the concern is here. And I understand that it's a problem with funding as well as human resources. But I can't comfortably agree to this when it's going to be really apparent to the public that one school has a really fabulous offering of enrichment activities and the other schools do not. So I don't have a solution for this, but I can't support the current calling this 1.0 FTE STEM teacher just for one school. I don't know how we can even, I don't even know how we can propose this and think that we're being equitable across the district.
thank you, Lisa. Kat?
I agree with the previous two, everything that they have said, and I wonder, is there a different way of looking at it, a different formula? Like Lynn, you mentioned that if you were looking at this as one whole body and not 4 separate entities, that it would be easier to distribute across the board. So I mean, is there another formula to approaching this, I guess I wonder? Because I'm totally not understanding. And just kind of back to your explanation, are you saying currently Bakersfield has, like they have 2 specials a day or 2 extras?
Yes.
Yeah, they have two what do we-
Electives.
electives every day.
Yeah. Or
Or
essentials.
essentials, yeah.
Essentials.
So how do I mean, I guess, like even that doesn't make sense to me. How is their schedule so different to allow for so much extra? Yeah, I mean, that just kind of stuck out to me, but so, yeah, I mean, is there another way, I guess, to approach this without, like the others are saying, adding this total huge enrichment to one school only? I'm totally not seeing at all either how we could begin to say that that's equitable.
I'm gonna say something that's probably not popular. This conversation is happening all across the state when it comes to really looking at 21st century opportunities for students. And it is really difficult to provide all of the opportunities in these really small schools for all the kids. And some of the communities are asking themselves, what do we want for all of the students in our community? And what are all the ways that we can get to that? If you said to me, you can go out and hire 2 STEM teachers and 2 language teachers, I could make it happen. We'll have to work through with the principals to try to figure that out. But there's an economy of scale that just gets harder when you're trying to do it in 4 separate places. And one of the things that other communities are contending with is we want more for our students in terms of opportunities than what we can offer in these small schools. So there are conversations happening in nearby regions that I'm kind of following in terms of them saying, we definitely want all of those things for our kids, but we can't figure out how to do it, both with the human resources that we have and with the money that we have to do it. So I think that it could be a bigger conversation, Kat.
I mean, and
And I
I
also
think,
do. Oh, I just wanted to add on, I think Aaron mentioned this, I also worry, will this open a can of worms with our transfer policy and end up maxing out Sheldon's? And then would there be like a waiting list potentially? And then how is that? I guess it's first come, first served, but just over time, once the word would get out, I would think that might, be a realistic, and then, Sheldon's growth is already huge and we're trying to keep up with that, so. But yeah, I mean, is there another formula? And then part two, and this has nothing to do with it, and I just wondered, and you don't have to explain it now, you can go back to it, but what does the family engagement coordinator do? Just a quick overview, I just wondered what that position actually does.
Do you want me to answer that?
But we don't need to switch
I was gonna
topics
say,
if
before
we're
we
still on
switch,
this
I
one,
just-
so.
I agree with what everybody is saying. I also appreciate the efforts made in Sheldon and district-wide to really give our kids new cutting-edge opportunities. I would be really curious to see if we did some sort of an audit to look at what electives are offered in each school and try and bring those to scale and make them equitable based on size. So if we have, a week of gym in one school, we should have a day, a week of gym in every school. And maybe we can find some savings in there enough to possibly shift a 0.3 FTE in one school to do more STEM, if that's really what the focus is on. But I would be curious to see if we can have almost like an elective audit to see how it is to scale, because it's not the volume that is needed in Sheldon is going to be different in Bakersfield, it's going to be different in every single school. So I would be really curious to see if there is a way to provide access to scale for each school. I'd be curious to see what that looked like.
That's something we can certainly work at looking at the audit, and one thing to remember is that every time you pull on a piece of this, there are those unintended consequences
Sure.
that come with it, so we
Sure.
can find 0.3 potentially.
Yep.
But that means 0.3 of a whole human.
Right.
So then if you reduce down to 0.7, you've
Yep.
probably lost your person, and then you play the piecemeal
Which I
game
get,
of
but I feel like
that.
for the sake of equity and making sure that we are doing our best to provide equal access to kids across our district, we need to, with due diligence, make sure that we're putting forth our best efforts in making that happen. I think an electives audit, if you will, could be part of that.
So are you thinking like, take a look at take Berkshire for example, at all grade levels,
Mhm.
what do they have access to, how many minutes a week?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had a question for folks who have spoken so far on this, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding the concern. I think the concern is that Sheldon is at a size where we are able to offer a different opportunity, and that if we instead had brought you a budget that had, not a 1.0 STEM teacher, but an additional half-time gym teacher and an additional half-time health teacher, that folks would be okay with that because it's evening out those ratios. And I just want to know if I'm reading the room right or not.
yeah, I mean, I think that fundamentally what I'm hearing from people is that in today, STEM particularly is of tremendous interest for a lot of, our learners and families. And so I think that I'm sensing a little bit of an emotional component here around like, it feels inequitable that only the students in Sheldon will benefit from a more kind of cutting edge learning opportunity, and why, and us not providing that to 3 other schools comprising hundreds and hundreds of children and learners who will not have that opportunity. When it's a budget that's shared by all the taxpayers in all 4 of these towns. And I mean, we have, it's this challenging dynamic, like, yes, we're always kind of have that eye on equity. Equity doesn't always mean everything is equal, and doesn't always mean that resources are allocated equally. But I'm sensing a little bit of a kind of an extra kind of, like that doesn't sit well specific to it being STEM because it's a really significant kind of advantage for students
I
in
think
only
if it
one
were
of our, in only
Anything new,
one of our 4 schools. What's that, Kat?
sorry. I mean, yes, because it's STEM, but also because it's like new, like, you know, gym has always been offered to all 4. Health has been, I don't know, we're trying to fill that one. I mean, kind of along what Erin was saying, if you were, say it was language instead of STEM, but you're saying language only at Sheldon and not at the other 3, I mean, that's where I'm coming from.
So the board is okay equalizing the amount of offering, but not at the extent of radically changing the breadth of offering from one school to the next. Is that a fair statement?
I don't necessarily feel like in this moment, I'm a hard no STEM at Sheldon because we can't achieve that in our other 3 schools. And what I heard, at least from Erin, was that I heard a kind of similar stance that, you know, yes, it would be a really valuable and awesome offering here at Sheldon, and we need to kind of stay attuned then to how can we also provide that for learners in our other schools.
I will say that I think that some of that is happening in some of our other schools as well. I mean, I will say that our art teacher currently is doing units that are STEM units within art. So while we don't have a STEM class, she is doing some of that in art already. And so I think there are opportunities that we can look at that may help to make that feel better in other schools, because I know that it's happening.
Right, and I know that in LEAPS, for instance, in Montgomery, they have had many offerings over the years that are oriented towards STEM. And, you know, I mean, and Erin spoke also to the language piece, because at the time of merger, we were talking about language. So, you know, again, we're in this position where we have one school that is substantially larger than the other 3, and therefore the staffing needs are just intrinsically higher, and therefore there are more opportunities to offer certain things owing to staffing needs.
So are you okay with Emily's suggestion to go back and do the elective audit? You're gonna get another look at this budget in December, so if we come back and show you like all of the minutes, all of the sessions, all of the electives that are offered at other schools, and maybe the added part about where else does STEM show up in our 4 schools. I mean, there's 2 parts I'll just react to. One is it feels like there is interest from the board in exploring foreign language in our schools and more opportunities around STEM. So those certainly could be, if those are values you have and that's something you want us to try to problem solve for, how could we figure that out? If you were willing to financially support it in the budget, we could also do work around that.
May I?
Yes.
And I'm gonna do my best to be as eloquent as I can. I confess some of these ideas are sort of forming in my head, so I apologize. I do have 2 different thoughts. I would like to offer the perspective. The school that I came from, we did do, excuse me, foreign language at the K-8 level. I will say one of the things that was a struggle for us, however, was typically with a K-8 schedule, what it amounted to was maybe meeting once a week. And I did find that our students did struggle to meaningfully acquire the language. And I would say that if we were going to explore that, we would probably want to consider trying to find a solution that would be every day, just because language acquisition did require that. Otherwise, what we found a lot of times was that it really did turn a little bit more into learning a couple of phrases and a little bit of the culture, but our teachers, I know, did struggle with that reality of trying to make it meaningful for students without having that consistency, because language acquisition really does take consistency, and I think also it takes a lot of practice, or you end up teaching students about a language without ever teaching them how to truly speak it. In terms of looking at STEM, and I just wanted to second what Rhoda mentioned as well, I do completely understand the idea that we want to make sure that there's equity among the schools. I do feel though that one of the assets of public schools is typically the best solutions do come from the ground up, because we also know that different populations of students have different needs as well. In terms of STEM, we've incorporated it into our library class as well. So one of the things is, even though I do not want to imply that I don't believe in equity. I think every student should have the opportunity to access STEM in a meaningful way. The solutions might look different though. The way to get STEM at Sheldon might look a little different than the way to get access to students at Berkshire, or access to students at Bakersfield, or access to students at Montgomery. So equity might be the goal, but it still might manifest itself in looking different at each campus.
That's fair.
Well said,
Yeah,
Karen.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Erin has a hand.
Erin?
Thank you. And I think that through the conversation, I'm noticing that like it is embedded, and I think it's just important that one, this position is there, it's needed, we know that. I want you to hear me say that because I don't want that to come across. But I think that as we move forward with that, the board moves forward with that we're really clear about where those students are getting these opportunities in other places. So I heard Rhoda here state it was happening in art. It comes up in math, it comes up in library. And I think that's really important that we articulate that and we share that with our stakeholders. But we also then think about, with that position also comes some pretty important materials, and we make sure those are available for those people in the smaller schools too, so that those kids have opportunities to use those materials and technology in those other areas.
Agreed.
So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
And I want to make sure that you're clear that I see the need for that position, and I'm not against it, and I don't want to hold it back from any student. I just want to make sure we're thinking outside the box so that all the other students have that same access. It just looked different.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Lisa?
Thank you. I just want to comment on a couple of things I heard. One of them was about the LEAPS program. I think, Mary, you mentioned that. I just want to make sure everybody understands that not every child takes advantage of the opportunity to attend the LEAPS program. So if we're saying that that's our answer for STEM or art or whatever it happens to be, that's not an answer for every child in the district. And the other thing is, I don't know who was speaking about STEM being offered in other areas of the curriculum. I didn't catch the name of the speaker, but I would really need to be convinced that it's an equitable offering and not just, maybe once a quarter a teacher's going to do a class on STEM when their primary subject matter is something else. So I'm very concerned about equity. We talk about it all the time. I know it doesn't mean equal, but in this case, it feels very unequal. And also, I just wanted to comment that there's something going on with feedback. Whenever any of us on Zoom are speaking, we're hearing a lot of feedbacks. I don't know if there are extra mics or something that you have in the library that are causing this to happen, but thanks.
Lisa, you might not know, but Courtney had to leave. She has had to travel tonight. So I don't know if we know how to fix the tech issue.
Yeah, and we're not getting it here. Zoom land is coming through loud and clear.
Yes, thank you for that. It's just really hard to hear, like Erin was getting it and I'm getting it. Kat's nodding her head too.
Are you on for sound or is it that that's on for sound?
It's
This
just a
is
big
not on for
TV.
sound.
It's just the big TV, it's not that computer?
Yep.
Okay.
So you also had a question about family engagement.
So Kat, the family engagement, that was a position that we piloted, and that was around when we had to create a plan after the pandemic when that American Recovery Act funding came to public schools. One of the areas that we had to create strategies for was around student attendance and truancy. And so the idea in the strategy was, what if we had someone whose sole focus was to be a resource to families and to students and to try to provide supports and sometimes in-home interventions to try to get students to come to school and to support families who are struggling with other things by connecting them with services and resources within the community. And we've piloted this now, is this year 3? 2?
It might be 3.
I think we're in year 3 now with a family engagement specialist, and we've spoken with the principals about what did you think in terms of, you know, what these people were able to accomplish, and it's come to the point where the principals are seeing the value that every single one of them said they don't want to go without the family engagement specialist. So they were all really supportive of putting that in the local budget because they're finding tremendous value in having someone's sole role be to re-engage those learners and to focus on, you know, positive attendance measures rather than the punitive truancy piece that has never really proven to get kids to come to school more. And we have other positive outcomes that are just coming from those resources and supports that they're being connected to as well.
And that was 2 positions spread across the 4 in different configurations.
So currently, there's one on the NMV side who is working with Bakersfield, Montgomery, and Berkshire. And Sheldon had someone, when it came time to build this strategy, they already had someone with that title here who had been doing some of that work before COVID. So they did not want to add another component on top of that here. So that person has left. So they don't have anyone this year doing that role. So the hope is to add one other full person and be able to increase some time in Berkshire and Bakersfield and get Sheldon some support as well.
So what I'm going to take you to next is very briefly the 2 handouts that you have in front of you. For the first one, this is the one that's in portrait orientation. I won't go through this page by page, but this is putting names and positions to those FTEs that we talk about. And the only thing I want to point out is that where you see this this highlighted pink color throughout that report, those are the positions where we have changed. If it's just the number that's highlighted, it means we've changed the FTE. If the whole name is highlighted, that's a new position. And you'll see there are a number of positions in there that are listed as to be hired paraeducator, to be hired this teacher. If they're not highlighted, the reason that they're in there as to be hired is that we haven't been able to fill them yet. So it's not changing from budget to budget, but currently we don't have anybody in our buildings serving that role. And then the other, the thicker packet that's out there is the sort of the line-by-line budget that you're used to seeing. This is for the general fund only. Again, I have not really looked at any of the lines that aren't tied to payroll, so I didn't want you to spend a lot of time with that tonight or over the next 4 weeks. But with the position changes that we've highlighted tonight, with the teacher settlement, which we know we have and we know has been higher than in past years, although it's pretty normal, we're hearing for the rest of the state, with some assumptions that I'm making on the paraeducator support staff increases and where we might land there, and then with the 16.4% health insurance increase. If you take all that into account and nothing else changed, your expense budget would be up about 7%. In a normal year, that would be worrisome going into the next month when we know there are going to be big increases in other insurance and certainly in tuition payments. Right now, given the move with Act 127 and the equalized pupils, it's something that we don't need to be worried about less, but we can be worried about less. And if we need to be concerned come December when we actually have a yield number and we have a good prediction on where our pupil count's going to end up, we can have those conversations. And then, again, very briefly, I will not spend a lot of time on this because you guys have seen this all many times. Just want to walk you through the tax rate again. And it is going to be different this year because of that change from Act 127. But basically, your budget number less the revenue is going to be your ed spending amount. That's divided by the number of kids to get your per pupil ed spending, which is divided by the dollar yield to get your homestead property tax rate. We think this number is going to go up significantly for us, and we think the yield number is going to go down significantly for the state. For us, it should be a net gain. For other places, there may be a net loss. And we'll, in a future meeting, if there's time, once we sort of figure out how some of the other provisions in Act 127, which give communities that saw a big loss in students some opportunity to have their tax rate capped, I'll try to talk you through that. The short story is that there are going to be some districts out there who are spending a lot of money, but whose tax rate is not rising to the place that it should be because of that soft landing they were given. So if there's a big chunk of money that is not being raised in those towns because they're keeping that tax rate low, it needs to be raised elsewhere, and that's most likely going to be among all the other towns in the state that don't have that cap. That's probably as high a level as I can give it right now without getting pretty deep into the weeds. And so I'm happy to answer any other questions on that. That's really all I've
Morgan,
got to
I
you.
just had a question on the budget. Under Sheldon, there's like 2 sections for paras, and I just wondered.
Do you have a page number on it?
Yep, Sheldon, and kind of at the top, there's like 3 paras, and then you go down and there's like another grouping of paras, so I just wondered.
And which page number are you on?
7.
So the first 3 are preschool.
That's what it is.
The first 3 are preschool. So that first section in the middle of page 7 is preschool, and then the rest is K-8.
Okay.
Morgan, I had a quick question about the high school tuition.
Mm-hmm.
This is page 26 of 27 on the big budget.
Yep.
So tuition to Vermont public schools, tuition to Vermont private schools, tuition to Vermont private schools. VC, what's that short for? Vocational?
Vocational,
Okay.
yeah.
And then what is the difference, tuition to VC on behalf versus the next line item is tuition to just VC?
Yeah, so this is a Vermont thing. If you look at those two lines for FY '23, so those actual expenses,
Yeah,
we paid about $600,000 in tech center tuition. The $188,000 we wrote the check for. The $418,000 the state writes a check and sends it directly to the tech centers and shorts us the amount of money they give us in terms of our ed spending. So it's nothing that you need to worry about as long as we've budgeted across those two lines enough money.
gotcha. And
And then oh, go ahead.
And some of these are just guesstimates, right, Morgan, as far as
Anything that's
FY20.
not payroll or benefits, I've not touched at all. So I'm just bringing over last year's numbers.
Oh, okay,
I'll be
because we
doing
don't
that.
necessarily know how many kids will be going to private school in and out of the state, and
Right,
so on and so
right.
forth.
Yep, I will be doing that over the next 3-4 weeks.
Okay,
We have not received many tuition bills yet, so I like to wait until we know where those 9th graders have ended up. And if we have all the 10th and 11th graders still.
right.
And then I'll bring them forward to this year's budget.
And do you try to get a sense from principals or of current 8th graders where, so you know?
We don't really anymore. We
No.
have, we just come up with an average, like we know that most of them are going to Enosburg, Richford. If they go to a private school, they're gonna be at the state average
State
anyway.
average,
So
right.
if we can come close on the raw numbers, we feel like
Yeah.
we're doing good.
Okay. Kat, you had a question?
Yeah, I thought I saw on one of your initial slides, Morgan, that there was 40 outgoing seniors this year. So that's only 40 seniors from our 4 schools?
So we,
Like, did we lose a lot along the way? Or is it just doesn't seem like a lot from 4 schools.
it was a low number, a pretty significantly low number, and it was the low number for both of the 2 high schools in general. And so I suspect it's partially a demographic issue. You would also see kids who are leaving school early might drive that number down. Either, hopefully they're not dropping out, but could be dropping out, or they're doing early college, which is what you hope. But I have a feeling that it was just kind of the ebb and flow of demographics, and that we do have a big 8th grade class in our schools now, and so we anticipate that the number of kids we're going to be paying tuition on is going to go up.
That's 40 total that are leaving, including the schools that we are sending outside of FNESU.
40 total that we budgeted for.
Okay.
So if there were a high number of kids who came from families where another parent lived in
Right.
Enosburg, you might have had them through their K-8 years, but if they've got a parent in Enosburg or Richford, you wouldn't necessarily be paying tuition for them. Or if they went to BFA and
So
they had a
it's not
parent in St. Albans.
Right, it's not a true number. It's just the 40 is the total of the tuition.
All right. So for now,
That's all I have for now, unless there are questions.
all right. Any other questions for Morgan from the board? Okay, great. Thanks so much, Morgan. Lynn, you're up.
Okay, I would like to start, if I could, with a very brief executive session to discuss personnel.
Sure, absolutely. You want to start with that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll make the motion to enter executive session by roll. Lisa?
Aye.
Erin? Kat?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
And I think
The recording has
stopped. Thank you.
I don't think I need any of the principals for this part.
Okay. Right, we're exiting executive session with no motions pending.
So we have some things informationally about hires and some of this, we have to write these reports a couple of weeks before these meetings, so. Bakersfield, Julie Benet covered for Rhoda, who was out for a little bit. So we're very grateful for Julie for stepping in. We have Joan Cheeseman, who had a school nurse that left Berkshire. Joan Cheeseman has been filling in there. Also grateful for her. Ellen Stanley is filling in as a grade 2 substitute teacher in Berkshire. And at Sheldon, we have hired Alexis Churchill for pre-K paraeducator, Quinn Racine for the long-term pre-K substitute teacher. Our teacher had the baby earlier than expected, so Quinn stepped in and covered, and Rosemary Stahl is the long-term substitute for grade 5. Under resignations, I have 2 resignations I'd like to ask the board to take action on. The first is Mark Stein, grade 2 teacher at Berkshire, and Pavna Singh, grade 5 teacher at Sheldon.
I'll make that motion by roll. Kat?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
We still have some open positions in the NMV side. We're looking for an enrichment teacher at Berkshire, paraeducators, school nurse. I think Gavin is also looking for a grade 2 teacher, and I think he's getting close to both of those.
Actually, we did make the offer and she accepted and she started today.
Great, I missed that one. Wow. Grade 2.
Yes.
Okay, can you say the name?
Yes, her name is Abigail McLaughlin DuBois.
Okay.
It was actually we were very fortunate, and it was actually a very quick turnaround, and with us being able to make the offer and her to accept. We are not putting her in immediately, of course. We're going to have a transition period where we're working with her on developing curriculum. So we have not announced it to families yet. We are going to do that tomorrow, where she's going to be formally introduced.
Great.
Just to help transition her in so that she can hit the ground running.
Great. That was a quick turnaround. I think I just signed that form, so.
Yeah, you had signed it, you literally signed it, and I think I was on the phone with her like a second later.
Do you need a motion on that?
No.
Okay.
Well, do we have like the contract to sign?
She signed it yesterday
Okay,
with Jamie
so we could do a
McAllister.
motion on that.
Okay, I'll make that motion to hire Abigail McLaughlin Dubois by roll. Kat?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
Montgomery is looking for a behavior technician, paraeducator. Sheldon is still looking for a technology support specialist. Paraeducators, a grade 5 teacher, and a behavior technician paraeducator. And we do have the health position still posted for NMV without luck. So I don't have anything specific under student for this meeting, except I'm going to share lots of student data next, but these are a few things that have been happening in the last few weeks around our NMV schools. So I'm trying to bring you data each month that is connected to the priorities of the board. So trying to look at early literacy / academic proficiency, trying to bring you information about social emotional learning, and then student-centered practices. And the board also has a priority that we're working on at the SU level around teacher and staff recruitment and retention. So there'll be some data that I'll share about that today as well. I was starting to get into the instructional models and looking at master schedules and looking at time and looking at that across the supervisory union. And I will tell you that was a bigger bite than I realized it was going to be. So I put it in here as I would be able to report out at this meeting, and I'm going to need next month to do that. But I asked Courtney to print those all, and it ended up being a binder. I expected it to be about 10 sheets that I could go through and figure it out, but it's much more complex than I thought. So I will work on that, and it actually, I think, will pair nicely with the audit around the electives as we come back next time, so look for that information. So I will jump in to this. So I'm sharing some data around, the first bits of information are gonna be around early literacy and literacy. So we have a local comprehensive assessment system that all schools in Vermont are required to have. So we have created a plan for when certain assessments are administered to kids across the supervisory union. And in September, all students in grades K through 8 across the supervisory union have to take the STAR reading assessment. So what I've done here is I have taken the STAR reading data and I have put it together. This is a commingling of data across all of our schools. So you can see all of our NMV schools. Sorry, our FNESU schools. Hold on, I need to go backwards. No, these are our NMV schools. So the blue is indicating the kids who, there's a benchmark for fall where kids should be scoring. So the blue indicates the percentage of students who are performing above. The green is the percentage of students who are performing at proficiency. Yellow is approaching proficiency, and red is below that standard. So this is our baseline here. What I'm going to be able to bring to you after the January test administration is the growth pattern. So we're going to be able to put our first grade side by side from fall to the winter administration and be able to look at that growth over time. I wanted you to know, when I ran this report, this is the first time that I've used our new system our data management system, EduClimber, to be able to produce reports like this, and I was confused by the grade 1 piece, and so I went to our expert EduClimber person, and she said, remember, grade 1 does the early literacy assessment for STAR. Some kids they did administer for some kids who were like performing at a high level. They did perform that STAR, so you see a little bit of data there, but it's just a handful of kids. So you're gonna need to just ignore that first column there, and I will send you these slides.
And these are all students across all 4 schools?
Yes.
Combined?
Combined,
Okay.
yes. The next is kindergarten is not included in the STAR report. They take several different assessments. So this assessment is the concepts about print. So this is really measuring what do students know about reading and about books and about directionality and one-to-one pointing and things like that. So these are of the 75-ish students who are assessed. You can see we had a good number that were in that exemplary category, and several that were proficient, and we have a lot that are approaching. So the hope with being able to access this data is we're looking at a high level, we're looking at it at the NMV level. The schools have the ability to look at the school level, and they have the ability to drill in to the student level too. So the hope is that as teams are reviewing this data, they're using some of this to help drive decisions about the types of interventions that students can be receiving and identifying what specific skill gaps might exist for them. So we hope that this data becomes really useful for guiding some of those conversations.
And Lynn, with something like this, where you have already a good number of kids in the blue category, at either end of this spectrum, do the teachers then start figuring out how to differentiate, so both the ones who are at the beginning level and need some additional supports in order to get to that proficient, but at that exemplary level, and I don't actually love that language, but that's the language that's here on the chart.
Right.
Do they start differentiating so that those kids that are perhaps a little further along can then get additional supports as well? So that can be challenging for one classroom teacher who's trying to kind of help support the kids who are still, working on developing those skills, aiming toward proficiency, as well as the kids that are past proficient.
That's always been the struggle, and I think historically we've looked at differentiating, so you're really looking at each individual student. And one of the ways we're thinking about this through the lens of our MTSS shifts and through Universal Design for Learning is we should be designing our learning knowing that learner variability is the norm. So planning for those margins, planning for those kids who we know are gonna come in proficient, so what's their stretch? What did they do when they already have demonstrated their proficiency? So this is ongoing work for us right now. This assessment probably isn't the best example of that because it's really an early literacy assessment, so it's really about, do I understand that you open a book like this and that the pictures, are upright and that you turn the page from left to right and that when you read the story, you point to the words and you go from left to right across the page. So there isn't really much more once they understand the concepts of print, but in some of the other assessments, that is the hope.
And I suppose the question's a little, right, we're looking at kindergarten here, so it's a pretty defined scope, scope of kind of skills. I think it can become more meaningful as children go higher up in the grades, where you can sometimes have these kids who are beyond proficient feeling like they're not being challenged enough.
And that's why we're working on the access piece, so that everybody has an access point that you have intentionally planned for that in your lesson. And I won't say that we're at a mastery level as a system with that. That's definitely something that we're working hard to get better on.
Yeah.
So the next up is a phonological awareness assessment. It's called the PASS. So this measures things like word discrimination, rhyme recognition, rhyme production, and you can see that several of our students are doing pretty well with this. It's a real early indicator of later success in terms of literacy. So for these students who are not proficient, this should be able to break it down to the skill level for teachers to be able to drill in and say, okay, these 3 students are understanding onset and rhyme patterns, and we should put them in a group and try to provide them some targeted intervention.
Camera's gonna be off for a second. Okay, on and recording.
Okay.
I'm just curious how many years we've been doing this. I mean, I know the EduClimber and the data component is new.
I can't pull past data. It has been administered in years past. I don't know if they all have because we just went through a revision of this, so I'd have to look at them side by side.
But moving forward
Yes.
now, we're really able to capture these test results and understand them, kind of the data.
And we can look at them any way we want to. So if you, as we're going through this next year, you could say to me, how does this, if we're thinking about preschool experiences, how does this kindergarten data look this year compared to how the kindergarten data looked last year? And we'll be able to do a side-by-side comparison of each of these subtests. Be able to give you that. We've never had the ability to drill in the way we do now.
And I'm curious with kind of post-COVID, what grades are we identifying? I mean, I know each grade was kind of impacted in different ways, and I've heard different conversations around which, level kind of struggled the most, but have we seen data kind of pinpointing particular grade levels where learning loss is most significant?
I think that if we were talking about social emotional learning, I don't know that we could find data that would pinpoint it because we really weren't gathering social emotional learning data quite so much, but I think that that's the thing that's talked about most in terms of, some of the kids who missed some of the early learning opportunities around, how does it work at school, and being able to interact and think about like how you work with other people and, share materials and things like that. I don't think I could pinpoint a grade level. I think that we're really we're looking at this because we would have been able to maybe do that with a summative assessment, but those are apples and oranges because they're different, and I can't compare past years in this, so.
Yeah.
There might be some grade levels at each of the schools that have a little more of a struggle than others, but I don't think there's a pattern that we've identified across the system.
Okay.
So on the next slide, these are other subtests, so you could see that this is about syllable blending, syllable segmentation, and syllable deletion. I don't know what the gray represents, I'll be honest. It says there's no target, so I don't know if this was maybe a student at a first grade level that was given the pass assessment and there isn't a target for that because it's a kindergarten assessment. That I'm still learning how this part works. So when you get up into the more complex skills in the phonological awareness, you can see that it gets much more challenging for students, which is what we would expect. So this is more about phoneme recognition by grade level and blending phonemes together to be able to read words, and then being able to segment those same phonemes. So those are skills that they learn. We hope that we will see much more blue and green as we go through the year with these students, but the majority of students we would not expect to enter kindergarten being able to do these things. The last one was phoneme deletion. Pulled the same data together, even though our goal is centered on literacy. I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to look at STAR math as well. So this is K through 8. Same data. Definitely have some areas that we're going to be pulling apart and wondering about and trying to figure out what are our action steps to improve upon this data. There's a PNOA test. It's a primary numbers and operations assessment that kindergartners take, and it measures all sorts of numeracy skills, and the entire chart was gray. And so I had asked Leah Belitsos about, what am I missing? I'm doing something wrong with this chart, but it's really that it's a baseline data, and it doesn't give you performance levels, but we will get that in the next administration of the PNOA. So it was administered. I can't really see much about that data, but we will be able to see more in the winter. Next up is teacher retention data, and this is something for those of you who are at the SU meeting, you've already seen. So this is a teacher experience level within FNESU. So this is how long they've worked just for us, correct?
Yes.
So it's, we have two ways that we look at experience level. It's like experience in the totality of their education career, but this is years they have been with us in FNESU. So this is the 2024 data. So you can see that in order to be considered veteran, you have been here at least 6 years, so 6 years and beyond. That's the blue, and then you see the green is you've been in FNESU for 5 years, and novice is brand new, and then the yellow is in year 2 or 3 in FNESU. So you can kind of see where we are in this year, and I'll check it back. The year prior is on the next screen. That's 2023, and then 2022. And then 2021. So you can, when you get this slide, you can kind of go in both directions, and you could see how some schools started out with when we start tracking this data, with a higher number of teachers who are considered veteran, and they have seen some shifts, and we'll see other schools. Bakersfield's a great example, that when we started tracking this data, they did not have a lot of veteran teachers on that staff. There had been a lot of turnover, but by the time you get to this year, you're getting so close to that halfway point of 4+ for your teachers. So it's an interesting way to look at that experience data. The next measure of data is we take a look at how many years of experience did the teachers have in FNESU before they left. So Morgan has further, we've been tracking this data for several years, but he's further unpacked this to reflect that in green, they left the school they were in, but they took a job somewhere else at FNESU. In orange, they left FNESU. In yellow, they left teaching. So I'm gonna track this through. 2022, that's what the data looked like. 2021. And 2020. Anybody notice anything about those shifts? Can you go in reverse, Morgan?
A lot of people leaving the profession in general.
Yeah.
Is that retiring?
Not necessarily.
I would say, but was that
Could
taken
be
account?
career change
Okay,
too.
yeah.
So when I look at this, it stood out to me that in 2020, that first year we started gathering this data, there were not a lot of people leaving teaching, and we know that the work has gotten much more complex in education over the last several years. You can see that, unfortunately, the number of people that are leaving because they're leaving the profession has grown significantly. So that's discouraging and something that we'll certainly continue to work on, and that's one of the reasons why we have this as a goal that we're working on. There is exit interview data, and we can take some time. I don't know if you want to do that now, Mary, or if you want me to keep going, we could take time at the end to go over it.
I'm really fine either way.
Okay.
And we could do it at the end if we wanna let our principals go.
People okay with that? Mary, Kat, and Aaron, I have it electronically. I'll be able to email it to you.
Lisa.
Oh, sorry, Lisa, Kat, and Aaron. So you want me to hold it?
Yeah, why don't we finish up the meeting, go through our principal reports, and then circle back
Okay.
to this?
So the last time we met, you asked us to come back with information about the early return, the early signing bonus for teachers. And Morgan did some really interesting research around this. And if you don't mind, I would love for you to talk through what this visual that you created represents.
Sure, so we found 5 groups that had put out a specific dollar amount for what it costs to onboard a teacher. One was the NEA at $20,000. Ed.gov, the Federal Agency of Education, put out 2 numbers, and these are both old, but they kind of gave a range, so a high of about 18,000 to a low of 43,000. SHRM is the Society for Human Resource Managers, or something very close to that. And then the Learning Policy Institute is an ed think tank. So you can see there's a pretty wide range in terms of what it costs to hire a new teacher. And this is specific to bringing someone on. It didn't look at learning loss for having, a change in your staff.
But it does look at from the beginning stages of the hiring process through onboarding, through hiring, onboarding, mentoring, trainings, all of that.
And so, given the amount that we spent last year on those early return bonuses, if the NEA's prediction was correct, or if their estimate is correct, we would have needed to retain 12 people to have a break even just on the retraining cost or the onboarding cost. Probably this the NEA might be a bit of a political number. I think the ed.gov numbers are probably more accurate, although they are old. And so you can see in the white numbers on the top of the blue bars are what how many teachers we would need to have retained, assuming that their estimates were correct.
And Morgan, we haven't specifically been able to capture what our historical kind of average of onboarding is. I mean,
What the
that's,
cost is.
it's
Yeah,
just kind of hard.
Nothing that we've
It's-
ever tracked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I've heard Jamie say it's up, I mean, for some reason 10K is a figure that
Well, I mean, I've thrown
sticks
out,
in my head.
I've thrown out 10K several times because that's commonly what people say is that the data supports that every time you turn over a new teacher, when you onboard a new one, it costs about $10,000
Yeah.
to onboard the new teacher, and you could see that it's somewhere within that range of 4,300 to 20,000. So that was a number that I had heard in the past, and I think that's
Okay.
probably what Jamie had gotten as well. So.
And it certainly feels right. I mean, we have three coaches this year who are at the high end of a teacher schedule in terms of their pay. And I mean, you could say how much of their job is really working on mentoring new teachers.
Almost 100%.
Yeah.
That's what their target group is.
And so that's just the mentoring cost.
Yeah. So any other questions on that?
And so, Morgan, were you able to capture the total amounts for NMV that we spent on the early signing bonuses and compare that to what our turnover has been historically versus what it was last year with the implementation of the bonus?
I was able to quantify the amount we spent on the early return bonus by district. I didn't break it out for this data by district. I just looked at the SU as a whole.
Okay.
So I think that this, coupled with the data that we had last month, where we were able to know what percentage of teachers were returning, and then there were some that did choose to stay from some of our schools that didn't sign in time for the early signing bonus, but several of the ones who didn't did end up leaving. So the number, we hired about the same number of teachers that we've been hiring the last couple of years, but it wasn't because of last year's departures as much, because we also were able to fill some positions this year that had been vacant for 2 or 3 years. So our total number was right up there still, but the number that was connected to people who returned or didn't return wasn't as high. I have that slide in there twice. Sorry.
And I'm just gonna interrupt quickly. I actually think I'm gonna backtrack. I think that it would be good for building leaders to stay when we're looking at exit survey
Sure.
data, because I feel as though there's when we're looking at these, there's a pretty significant role that, building leaders play with, staff in the buildings. And so it would probably be helpful for everyone to hear these. So I think you could insert it wherever makes sense
Okay,
at this
well, I'm
point.
gonna shift into, I'm almost at the end of mine, so it's fine to talk about it now if you want.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so there are 2 kinds of data that you have. You will get the exit survey data that has the pie chart, and for those of you online, I'm gonna send that to you in just a moment. This is an anonymous exit survey that we send out to all staff when they leave, both support and professional educators. The second, this is Morgan's budget. That is not the right pile. I give that to you. So I've lost the second pile, but let me start with this one, so I don't.
And Lynn, just while you're passing those out, Morgan, I have a question then. So when we are looking at the retention bonus, the retention bonuses that we did, You know, and we're comparing onboarding costs, average onboarding costs. We can't quite land on what our costs are, but we surmise that it's somewhere in this $4,000 on the low end to maybe upwards of $10,000 per person. I mean, in your estimation, do you feel as though that amount, what the amount was, which we don't know what it was for the NMV, was significant enough in achieving the goal of retaining and not then having to onboard X number of new teachers to the tune of, $4,000 to $10,000? I mean, that's the nugget that we're trying to distill down to, right? Do we want to continue to include early signing bonuses in this budget that we're gonna be constructing? And it's still a little vague to me whether the impact it had offsets, what the, offsets the cost.
And I think that it's never not gonna be somewhat vague. If you're asking for my gut feeling, I think it's helped in an era where we have a lot of people leaving the teaching profession. We are in a place where we are still struggling to hire folks, despite the salary settlement that we just had. And in 2 years from now, that answer might be different when some of these changes to the ed funding formula means that there are more teachers available out there. Right now, there's been very few things going our way in terms of hiring. And so I think that this has been helping.
Right. And I know it also, goes without, or maybe it doesn't go without saying that there's more to just not having to onboard a new teacher. There's that institutional kind of longevity that's really valuable. Like Lynn's charts showed, how many veteran teachers do we have in a building? And if it allows us to kind of keep and retain our staff so they too become veteran teachers in a particular building, there's a tremendous amount of value that we can't really put a dollar amount on there.
It's difficult to quantify that. I think it's about like what they can offer in the classroom, and it's also about the work we're trying to do as an organization. So we're moving forward with our work, and at the same time we're onboarding people and trying to bring them along with us. So we're having to figure out in that onboarding process, not only are we onboarding you into education, we're also onboarding you into our approachable learner work and into the priorities around educational equity and around the social emotional learning. And there are several things that we want to get traction and momentum with, and there's a cost to that.
Yeah.
And we continue to do that. We could try to, I don't know if there's another crack we could take at the data part of it as we come back, have a discussion in the next month.
Well, I am assuming that in the next iteration of the budget, we'll have that figure in there at some point, right? Because we would want to, because we did it originally with ESSER funds that are now no longer available, correct?
The ESSER funds actually go until September of next year, so we can squeak out another round using ESSER funds if that's the direction the board wants to go.
Okay.
That was something you wanted to pull into your general fund. I don't think you'd have to do that until FY26.
Okay.
We could certainly have that conversation.
And that we may be negotiating with teachers by then. Can't remember. It's not this year, but it's either next year or the year after.
Right.
So you do have all of it. You have the exit survey. The first part that you see is the anonymous exit survey. We do try to redact names if there's something in there that's specific to an individual. When you go to the last page, you'll see the 22-23 in-person exit interview data. That is Jamie's exit interviews with people.
Let's like punt it then to the next meeting. Okay.
I just am trying to find it. I was sure that I had it in my email from the scanner and I cannot put my fingers on it to give Kat, Aaron, and Lisa access to it right now. So we're wondering if we want to hold this, let me give it to Lisa, Kat, and Aaron when I get back tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then we bring it back around at the next meeting.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Lynn, is this the same data that you emailed me when I was sitting in on the SU meeting?
No, that's different. That data was around, we did another survey of staff in September, Lisa, and that was about trying to figure out of the new people who came to FNESU, why did they choose us? And, you know, what was the difference in money there? And then of the people who returned to FNESU, why did they stay? What suggestions did they have? So it's a little different.
That would have been so easy, I could have emailed it to everybody.
I know. So, do you want me to just move to the next section?
Yeah, that's fine.
So really it's almost the last thing I'm going to talk about tonight. So we did a lot of work this summer with a collaborative group. We started with our leadership team over the summer, and then we pulled together a committee to look at what does professional learning look like across the supervisory union for educators. And we had some new voices at the table, and one of the strategies that came out of this, Rhoda was there.
I was.
In, I think, Terry Sue, were you for that?
One of the days, I think.
Yeah.
So one of the things that came out of this is our work with Katie Novak. Katie is an expert on universal design for learning, and she's someone that several of the leaders in FNESU have had the opportunity to work with over the course of the last 2 school years before this school year, through the Vermont Superintendents Association. We found a lot of value in learning with Katie. So we engaged with Katie and her partner Mirko, and they're doing professional learning with us. We have had 2 sessions now. So our first session was back in September, and session 1 was focused on setting the foundation, goal clarity, and construct relevance with AI enhanced choices. So that was a really eye-opening and exciting session. The teachers had a ton of questions and were really excited about several of the places that she went to. She had another session with us just last week on October 24th, and it was really about empowering student success through self-reflection and goal setting. And in each of the sessions, we had a pre-meeting with Katie, and we said, listen, we're working on a portrait of a learner in FNESU, and we would love for you to be able to think about UDL through the lens of the work we're trying to do around our portrait of a learner. So that first time, she was able to really make connections to her topic, to independent decision maker and information savvy, and I think it's starting to click with people, and they're starting to see how they can implement some of the things in the classroom to help us get at that goal for students. This last time, she was also focused on independent decision maker. We have Katie again in November, so she'll be talking about tailoring learning, UDL, differentiated instruction, and small group strategies focused on independent decision maker, information savvy. We'll have her partner Mirko, who we haven't met yet, in January, who will be focusing on amplifying student voice, incorporating feedback, and strengthening UDL equity links. And that portrait of a learner focus will be around being a contributor. And then Mirko will join us again in February to talk about empowering student contributors, cultivating a culturally responsive leadership. And this will also be focused on contributor. And then the last session with Katie of the year will be on March 22nd, and that will be scaffolding creative thinking with UDL, focused on the POL creative thinker characteristic. So it has been pretty exciting in these sessions. She's offering these, she's virtual, and these are on some of our early release days and some of our SU days, and she has a remarkable skill. She's able to do total engagement strategies with 300 people at once in a virtual in a virtual way. So everybody, she says, if we're going to do this, everybody has to have their own computer, because she'll post a question and then sometimes she'll put people in breakout groups to have discussions, and the feedback that we're getting is tremendously positive. So in the slideshow that I'm going to send you, on the next slide, this is Katie, and this is actually a video. So if you wanted to get an example of what one of the professional learning opportunities our teachers experienced this year is, that's our session 2. Just click on the picture and it will bring you to the recording of that video, which was pretty exceptional.
Did you send, I don't think I got.
I'm gonna send it to you.
You'll send it, okay,
Yes.
great.
So I had a little surprise yesterday. So we found out late in September that we had 2 schools identified by the AOE for comprehensive supports, and one was Bakersfield and one was Richford Elementary School. So there's work that we're going to need to do with the agency around the supportive measures that they're going to put in place for us around that recognition. So I got a call yesterday, and I was told by Deputy Secretary Boucher that there was actually calculation error in how they determined which schools were identified as in need of comprehensive supports, and Bakersfield was not, they were incorrectly identified, so they are no longer on that list. as in need of comprehensive supports. So obviously we'll continue to be working on our improvement efforts. They won't have the benefit of the additional financial resources around what that would have brought, but they also won't have the added strains that also comes with. So we have one school on that list.
One school in the SU.
In the SU, yeah. The next slide is, we already talked about that, Morgan, so that's all I have, unless anyone has any questions.
Great, thanks, Lynn.
I wonder.
Oh, Erin, is that you?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
I had a wonder if, I'm hoping that the AOE is going to make that public as well.
So they are. They, I had asked her that question. They're going to do a press release. They're owning that it was their error. They're going to do a press release to acknowledge that there was something wrong with the way she described it is just the calculation of how they got there. And so one of the things that I quickly tuned into in our phone call was that we were getting that kind of call, but there was a superintendent somewhere else in the state that was getting a very different call, that was being told for the first time that they had a school on that list as well. So there's going to be a press release, I think she said this week, that will acknowledge that error and share that information. You all have the slideshow now.
Great, thank you, Lynn.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're up with our principal reports, and Rhoda?
I don't have a whole lot to add, partly because I haven't been in the building, as you know. So I did my best to kind of capture all the things that I had seen. Julie did a great job of writing every day a log for me of her work in the building and what she was seeing, which was awesome and made my return much easier because not only did she write it every day, but she culminated it all in one log for me that we went over together today of like, these are some things to pay attention to. These are some things that I noticed, which was great. It was wonderful to be back in the building today. Kids and teachers seemed very excited, and it was just good to be there.
We're glad to have you back.
Yeah.
Thank you. Gavin?
Well, when I woke up this morning, there was this weird, cold, slippery stuff on my... Sorry, just making a joke that I'm from Arizona, or was living in Arizona for the past 10 years. So, in terms of academic proficiency, last time we had spoken, I'd gone over a little bit of the results with the STAR assessment. So now the shift has come to, we've gathered the data, now what are we doing with the data? Probably the biggest thing that we've needed to do in terms of leverage points is building teacher capacity to take that data and act upon it and let it inform their instruction. So with that said, last week we brought in Leah Belitzos, one of the interim co-directors of curriculum, to do a professional development on how to meaningfully use EduClimber in order to generate reports, in order to help with our MTSS process to track interventions and also build EST plans as well. This was something that we actually had whole staff, including our UAs, and probably the first question was, do we need to know this? And the answer was yes, because they're working with enrichment. And also, whenever your music teacher is working with students, well, if your music teacher is working on meter, it's helpful to be able to know, okay, you know what, this is where the students are with math skills. Or when your art teacher is working with visual interpretation, it's helpful to know, this is where my students are with literacy as well. In addition to that, we have shared some additional resources provided to us from the SU, particularly from Amber Renadet, one of our SU level instructional coaches, on how to use Renaissance, which is the platform that STAR uses in order to build curriculum-based measurements. And then finally, we have continued with our efforts for PLCs to make sure that we are running active agendas, and particularly to make sure that when our teachers are meeting, or our professional learning communities are meeting in order to review student data. They're using the leverage point of instructional strategies. And then we also are trying to incorporate our portrait of a learner in as sort of our anchor point, because we do have essentially what's called singletons, where we have one teacher for each grade level. So to have some of that vertical alignment, the curriculum may change, but those bigger skills and those effective teaching strategies do not. In terms of social emotional learning, there were two big points of movement that we've had. The first was that on October 25th, we had our first flock meeting, which is during our normal advisory time. Instead of meeting according to homeroom, we had our entire school meet in different groups, and they were heterogeneous groups. So we had 8th graders working with kindergartners, and of course anywhere in between as well. We also made sure to mix it with teachers as well. So we got some of our students got to work with teachers whom they wouldn't normally work with. The first focus was basically on building those flock meeting norms. However, what we will see going forward is they will begin to pick up different common trends or themes that they've been learning in their SEL classes, and they'll be working at it as a vertical group in order to see that basically those commonalities that they're learning, and to be able to learn from each other as well. The other big shift was, and of course in the notes you'll see the pictures that were provided, those were from our flock meetings on October 25th, and I spared you all from putting another selfie in there as well. Finally, in terms of SEL, we also have been doing some extensive work, particularly with our 6th and 7th grade, because the data has shown in terms of referral data that those have been the two dominant grades where we've had student referrals. And so the biggest question was, what do we need to do differently? When we had our first meeting in mid-October, one of the norms was I added a norm that wasn't an SU norm, but I felt was important, which was we do not despair. Instead, we need to focus on what we can control, because sitting around and complaining like, oh, the kids are getting in trouble again, that's not going to cause a whole lot of movement, and that's actually not going to really, it's going to make the problem worse, because we're going to all leave the meeting feeling even worse than when we came in. So we started to look at, okay, what can we do differently to help reduce those referrals and help those students become successful? One of the things we're working on right now is we're working on revamping our behavior matrix so that we can clarify what our expectations are. We're also working on identifying key academic behaviors that we need to teach explicitly to the students. As the Solution Tree Conference on PLCs was mentioned several times, when working with student culture, almost the most common thing you hear is, well, the students should know that already. Well, the thing is, if we had that attitude, would we have that attitude about math? Well, the students should know math already. The students should know how to read already. Of course not. We're educators, and behavior needs to be taught as well. And so that was one of the first charges that we are working through, is identifying what are those key common behaviors that we need to teach explicitly. And then finally, also looking into how can we better incorporate SEL instruction into our core subject classes, particularly for those grades, and working on effective behavior interventions in the class as well, particularly those non-negotiables. Because what some of our students are finding is the bar can vary from class to class to class. So students might say, well, you know, being in attention in this class is this, and we can even whisper to each other. Being in attention in this class means we have to sit up straight with our eyes on the teacher, so making sure that we have that consistency as well. In terms of student-centered learning, we will be holding our student-led conferences on November 14th and November 16th from 3:15 to 7 p.m. We are going to be working on students being able to demonstrate what learning they have had. This is something where we are looking for 100% participation. Last year we had about a third of the students show up only, so we are going to be putting forth a greater outreach for the community to make sure that we're bringing in families. And then right now what our different groups are doing is they're working in their respective teams, K2, 3, 4, and middle school, in order to finalize the procedures for what the student-led conferences will look like as well. I always show, it's nice because fortunately our board meetings always coincide with our whole class morning meetings as well. And we're a little bit further sprawled out today, but this month's Teacher of the Month was Hannah Joyle, who is our second grade teacher. She was awarded the title belt, and the reason she was awarded that title belt was due to her exemplary work in establishing a vibrant classroom culture, particularly with having established procedures, and also really being able to incorporate the students into those procedures so that they're taking greater ownership of their learning as well. What was exciting about this is actually Ms. Joyle's first year as a teacher as well. So this was a very proud moment for all of us, especially her, and also our instructional coach, Jessica Litchfield, who's really worked very closely with her as well to help set her up for success.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks so much, Gavin. Terry Sue,
Just a couple quick
anything you want to
ones.
highlight? I mean, I know
Yes.
you did your spotlight.
Sure, something I forgot to mention, and Lynn happened to be visiting on the day we had our annual staff versus student football game, so there was some pictures in the video, which I was very nervous about, having not been here, and I was nervous about injuries, etc. I told the middle school team I'm not so certain I want to continue this tradition, but it ended up being a blast. So I'm all in now. And the winter one is a staff versus student basketball game, so I'm really looking forward to that one. We have our season for basketball starting soon. In a couple weeks, they have their first games. We have parent-teacher conferences coming up as well. They have, here at Sheldon, I'm guessing because of all the transitions that happened last year, did not start student-led conferences last year. So we have 3 grades dipping their toes into it this fall, and then everyone will be invested in the spring. For 100% doing student-led, but this fall 3 grades are gonna do student-led this fall with the parents do have the option to say, okay, now I need a little bit of the traditional format in the fall, as they get, they learn the process as well. So we're really excited about that, and I'm really excited that I had those early adopters who are just willing to take risks and see what happens. So those 3rd, 5th, and 6th graders are getting ready for it and really excited to be able to brag a little and talk about their learning. We've had a number of, I'm trying to build this culture of showing that we appreciate each other, not forgetting that we as adults need to remember to tell each other when we're doing a good job and use meaningful ways to do it. I've been doing kitschy kind of things, like we also have like the STAR staff, but we do it weekly and then they get a parking spot for a week, but it passes staff to staff. So we are on staff number 9 right now, who's partaking of our parking lot, and we have like a document and it has like the paragraph that somebody sends out, like, hey, today's Monday, so I'm gonna be handing it off starting tomorrow morning. You get the spot and here's why. And it's really cool to see who's noticing things about, because sometimes we forget. It's been a lot of support staff so far this year, so I'm really excited that they're getting noticed and feeling appreciated and loved. And then something I've always done is this apple nacho bar, so I did that for staff here and no one had ever heard of it. So I had some weird stuff at the apple nacho bar, just so you know, like sprayed cheese, or I don't, because cheddar and apples work really well.
They do.
But yeah, caramel, mini marshmallows, etc. So it was really fun. They got to make their little apple nachos and they really appreciated it. And then some of the students and we were talking about how we appreciate others, and they asked me what I did in my previous schools. I'm like, well, I always had a graffiti wall. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, we had, paper put up and kids could go something they appreciate, thankful for, grateful for, etc. And the middle school was like, yeah, we can't do that here. And I was like, oh, because I need to censor some things? Oh yeah, So then we came up with the bricks. So that when you walked in, I'm sure a lot of you noticed the bricks have started going up because the kids have started submitting their bricks to be put on the wall. And so it's so far no inappropriate. It's been wonderful. It's really fun. 2 of the classes walked by this morning and like, oh, we need to add bricks. So they did that this morning. Cool. So we're going to continue that throughout the year. We're going to see how far the wall goes. I'm hoping this entire hallway is done by the end of the year.
Awesome.
But then everything else is in the notes that I can think of. So.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Oh, and the mod's going great. Wonderful.
Oh, nice. Good.
Now that we're in.
Great. Any So we're on to our board business. Any future agenda items that anyone might like to mention now? There's always time.
Yeah, I'll add something. I had a meeting today, with the Regional Advisory Board for the Cold Hollow Career Center Maple Run. But maybe I could just add it to next month's agenda to just kind of go over some stuff that we talked about.
It's up to you, Kat, if you'd like to discuss now, we certainly can make time for that, or if you'd like to punt it until the next meeting, whatever works best for you.
Yeah, maybe I'll just wait. I mean, it's already 9 o'clock. I hate to.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll,
Yeah, let's just wait and see if we have time.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Lynn's gonna add it in for next month's meeting, which will be December 6th at Berkshire. And anything else anyone would like to discuss tonight? All right, so I'll make a motion to adjourn. We'll do that by roll. Erin?
Aye.
Lisa?
I
Kat?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Thank you all. Stay warm.